We are live, by the way. So, welcome, chat room, to Podcasters Roundtable. We haven't started this round yet. We are working our way through some technical issues here. And let's see, I am recording. So, I do record locally as well as the Hangout on air. But we got ground loops. We've got cameras disappearing. People not making it into the roundtable. Man, time is already so limited. It's hard to start these things like 45 minutes before we start the show, and then we have 45 minutes after the show when we're talking. It's like going to the gym, right? It takes 20 minutes to get there, and then you work out for an hour. Then it takes you 20 minutes to get home, and you got to shower. Going to the gym's not just like a half-hour thing. So
Well, you also need to stretch before and stretch after. All
straight,
total, you get about 2 minutes of workout in.
Yeah, right. When it took you like 3 hours to get that 2 minutes in. So, whoo, I'm feeling good. Oh, so we are showing up. Let's see. What does the live stream look like? This is the first time. There we go. Drinking coffee. All right. Hopefully it's. Wait, hey, do I not hear the live stream? How come? Why do I not hear audio on the live stream? That must just be me. Audio should be coming through. Yeah, hopefully, if you're hearing
Yeah, it's
audio,
working.
okay, good. That's really weird that I'm not. You know what? No, it's not muted or anything. So, no idea why the browser is deciding not to give me audio. But as long as the chat room is hearing audio, we are good. Hey, someone's talking to Mike Russell. If Mike Russell's in the chat, which I don't see him, he was invited to be here. James, I don't know what's going on with James. He's our new roundtabler, so he's having issues. No, Paul, normal people shower. I don't shower for the gym. It's a complete waste of time. I like to cleanse myself with my own bacteria. So I just let it do its job. But that's my day job. All right, Eileen hears us. Thanks for joining us, Eileen. Chris hears us. Awesome. We're being heard. I don't know where we've lost Corey. There's Corey. We're hoping Corey sticks around.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can I hear you now? I can hear you now. Dave Mansueto. I should know how to say his last name better, but it's funny because half the time you don't actually say names out loud when you're online, unless, of course, you're on a podcast or something. But we may need a new roundtabler to step in. I am not seeing James, who was coming from Australia, 3 in the morning. Saw him try to get in here a couple times.
He's trying to install the Google Talk plugin he was playing.
Oh yeah, well good. Maybe he'll pop in at some
Yeah.
point. Oh, we've seen this. We've seen the head pop up several times, and then get ejected. Corey, what's up?
How's it going?
Nice. What'd you do?
I changed computers.
Ah, sounds good. Level's a little low, but you sound good.
Okay. That a little bit better?
Yeah, that's great. So your other computer is sending a ground loop.
I don't know. Yeah.
Such is the way with these things, right?
Yep.
All right, so we should probably light this fire. Dave is present. Does Dave want to join us live on the roundtable? Is he prepared for that? An impromptu. I need a new roundtabler is the trick, Paul. Yes, I did see Mike Russell is. What was that? I get some type of message? There was a message somewhere.
I think it's from James.
Unless that was someone else's message sound.
It does look like James can join. It keeps throwing him off.
Yeah, he keeps getting the boot. Always good to restart if with Chrome sometimes. All right. It'd be nice if you could like tell Google to like record when you want, right? We can broadcast and then we can press record. That would be kind of nice.
Yeah. That's the thing that prevents me from using Hangouts on Air or YouTube Live more often, because I want to have a countdown and I want my audience to get a pre-show and a post-show. But I hate the processing time it takes on YouTube just to trim the opening and closing.
Yeah,
Plus,
we
if you
can't.
go over 2 hours, they won't let you.
Oh. Didn't
You
know
go
that.
2 hours, they won't let you trim.
Right.
Interesting. Good intel. Yeah, at work we don't use YouTube because of that very issue. I think it's the same thing with live stream, right, Daniel, where you can't have an embedded player on your web page that stays where the show keeps showing up in the same player. I got to re-embed
Right.
a new player every time. It makes it
Yeah,
not
the new.
usable for us, YouTube Live, and we really need it to work. YouTube Live is the perfect solution, but whatever.
Unless you do something like schedule your show in advance and then use something on your site to be able to rotate through your
Yeah.
code on a certain schedule. I'm looking at maybe developing something like that for my own use.
Yeah, it's quite ridiculous that we'd have to do that. It's pretty
Yeah.
pretty far to go, but yeah, and as soon as you do that, hey, we got this feature. You can now embed one channel page.
I've thought about other things, like what if I embed a playlist? What would happen there? Would it automatically update?
Does it do it? Is there a is there such thing as a live playlist? Like,
Well, you can add your video to a playlist after it's been recorded live, or while it's recording, it can be added to a playlist.
interesting.
It's something I want to play with to see.
Yeah. All right, well, I have a considerable amount of trimming here. I think we've got what we're going to have for the moment. We might be able to bring in people later on. Hopefully we'll get a new roundtabler, but let me start this off for the recording and for the part that I will trim here. So I will pause for a second and we will go. Podcasters Roundtable, round 28, breaking the mold. Not the fungus, the mold that we've put ourselves in as podcasters. Okay, it actually doesn't even matter. Obviously, it's called Podcasters Roundtable. Doesn't matter if you're a broadcaster. We've dealt with what we call ourselves. I don't care what you call yourself. If you're online and you're producing content, perfect, good job. If you are a podcaster, well, then you found a home here at Podcasters Roundtable, but everyone is included. And a lot of, one of the good things about saying podcaster versus broadcaster, I think, is that it implies that probably the majority of people don't have a background in, say, broadcasting, right? If you hear broadcasting, you kind of feel like, hey, this person maybe went to school for broadcasting or journalism or has some experience. Podcasters, for me, not to give it the amateur hour tag that Mr. Jobs gave us, but it implies that maybe probably someone on the other end of the mic is maybe their first real experience at broadcasting out to the world. So with that, I think the lack of experience, as well as I think it's good and bad. And on the good side, hopefully it leads to extreme creativity. So with podcasting or online broadcasting, well, I'm going to stick with podcasting because that's what I call it too. But it makes me want to go off in the left field and talk a whole bunch about different things. But with podcasting, it feels like one of the last truly free mediums, right? No censors, no one creating the content for your show, no one stepping in and saying, nah, let's go this direction, that direction. It's all on you for the most part. I mean, if you podcast for an organization, you may have some type of outline to follow. But at its roots, it's guys like us grabbing a microphone in our house, recording, either locally or now it's live streaming, and pushing that out to the world. So, how do we figure out how to podcast, right? Most of us have grown up watching TV or listening to the radio, and maybe you follow that format. Maybe you start off thinking you need a radio voice, right? You're like, well, I don't have the voice for podcasting. Well, what's cool is you don't need the radio voice, right? And you don't have to be this TV news anchor looking dude or girl. It's all about your everyday person having a voice and broadcasting out to the world. So with that, it implies, I hope, that we'll see some original programming. But I think that oftentimes we might fall into a pattern of, well, this is how I've seen it done. How do I do it? I'll follow this, right? So you maybe sound like a radio show. And we know that podcasting isn't a lot like a radio show in that you don't have to constantly remind your audience where you are, what they're tuning into. You don't have to always, you don't have ads necessarily. Some people may. So, is it limiting our creativity by sort of following the mold of old media? And our lack of experience may lead us down that road. And I'm hoping. Basically, I'm calling you boring. Are you boring? Take a serious look at yourself. And I want to see, I was thinking, here we are. We hit a decade of podcasting, right? And here I am rambling on. We'll get there. We hit a decade of podcasting. And as I look back, it's like, have we seen some shows that have just been so different than anything we've seen before because the opportunity is there? Or is it kind of just, sometimes we'll call it TV for the internet, radio for the internet. Is that all it is? Or are we being creative? So let's see, Daniel able to join us today, and we'll get to the introductions here in a second, which was awesome. I didn't think he was going to be here. But we're at a weird time today. If you're watching live, we're 10 a.m. Pacific time, middle of the day. Took the day off, got some other stuff to do, including getting a roundtable in. And Dave Jackson not here today, but hopefully he sent in some feedback, which I'll look for, because Dave he's spanned the ages of that decade, and he's seen a lot of content. But anyways, let's find out if we're boring, if there's a way we can break out of the mold, who's already doing it, and just think of our medium as this completely blank canvas. And I just want to push people to always be thinking differently with podcasting because, hopefully 10 years from now, we're not talking about all the regulations that we have to follow, right? Oh, we do have to produce to -3 dB for, whatever. It's free. It's open. All right. Let's stop. Let's stop with all the rambling for now. We'll get back into it after the introductions. Corey, welcome back to the roundtable.
Hey, thanks a lot for letting me come back on. Talk about breaking the mold. You talked about being boring, and it's kind of funny because we kind of started the IVMB podcast with the intent of being boring. So.
Well, you're Cubs fans.
Right.
It's not a lot to...
I'll explain why later. But
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you just leave it out there to hang, I'll assume why you're boring, and I'll go with the fact that, you're Cubs fans, there's not much to get excited about. But
yeah, that's partially it. You're
fine.
Right.
I'm kidding. But you know what? You're a good example here, and I don't know how many episodes or how many rounds you've been on.
3 or 4, I think.
Okay, if you tell me 9, this is your last one because 10 is a T-shirt, and we can't let that happen. But a sports show is a great example because format Tim's is fairly well established there. So we'll get into that a little bit. Daniel, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm Daniel J. Lewis from theaudacitytopodcast.com and podcastmasterclass.com. And what we're talking about here is kind of part of why I titled my show The Audacity to Podcast. Not just the software program, but that guts that you're talking about, that here the little guy can do something amazing without the background. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Cool. And not to be confused, I'm calling myself boring. It's a challenge to me for 2 different reasons. I think maybe I've gone a little far backwards or a little far backwards. Maybe I've gone backwards a little bit because I think my first show sort of broke the mold, and we'll get into that. But the Podcaster's Studio, if you listen to that show, pretty structured, kind of follows a format, and maybe a little boring. So it's a challenge to myself to always think, hey, man, you've got this thing. You've got this show that you can do anything you want with. make sure you're having fun. I just want to make sure I'm having fun and not getting scared to not be yourself. And I think maybe at some point we get scared, and we'll dive into all the business podcasts and everyone that's out there. Now the main talk is, hey, let me make money with my show. And I think that makes some people apprehensive. And that to me is not the original spirit of podcasting. I like to keep that around. So we'll dive into that. Gary, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Thanks. We're broadcasting here from New Zealand and with live bees. So, we're not bland or bored.
That one doesn't look too live, but welcome from New Zealand. What time is it there, Gary?
It's 5:30 in the morning.
Hey, and I'm the one drinking coffee, and Gary's, it's 5:30 in the morning. Something's wrong with that, but maybe it's all that honey he consumes. It just keeps natural energy.
Natural energy. Yeah, I think podcasting gives you a chance to be creative to a niche as well. Where broadcasting is bland. Podcasting isn't bland because you're actually broadcasting a specific niche audience rather than the masses.
Yeah, and that's part of it too. In some of the comments that I've seen is that people are saying, well, first of all, I think right off the top here, who said that? Let's see, Jeff Brown said structure's not a bad thing. I agree, structure's good. It probably is important for the longevity of your show, but break the structure once in a while, please. Dave Jackson did that very well on episode, I think 400. You have 400 episodes, right? Okay, of the School of Podcasting recently, and several of you probably heard that. And his 400th episode, he said it before he even before a lot of people even heard it, and said this one's very different. And it was awesome. I sat in my car in the driveway as I was coming home from something, and I listened. I finished it because it was so good. It was like, it was actually funny because it was a parody of the radio. He just did these very creative things. I was laughing. It was pretty funny. But what's that, Gary?
Binky and the Biz or something. Oh, the
Yes.
Wiz.
Yes. He made up. He brought fictional characters to life, and it was a lot of fun. And we don't have a new roundtabler as of yet. Hopefully, we will get. We were supposed to have another early morning roundtabler from Australia. James, it looks like he's having issues getting into the Hangout, but hopefully it works out for him at some point. With this podcasting, is it boring? Have we broken the mold? Daniel, you talked about designing your show, or the name of your show means something different than just the software program. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, what I was thinking when I launched the Audacity podcast is, I did want it to rank for the word Audacity and podcast. But the reason I named it and continue to keep that name, even though I've moved on past Audacity, is because it's always been about podcasting and about the boldness that it takes to podcast. Because that's what podcasting enables us to do, is that some of these people are just in their basement, in their closet, or somewhere that they don't have millions of dollars, but they're producing things that are beating the companies that have millions and billions of dollars to invest in this kind of stuff, but they're producing a much better product or something far more engaging, entertaining, more helpful, less biased or more biased, or whatever the case may be. And that's where it comes down to being bold enough to, break the mold, to cut your own path, to whatever metaphor you want to use here, to be able to do your own thing and do it the way you want to do it, even though you will get some negative feedback from it.
Yeah, and I see you just commented in the chat room to Jonathan, looks like Colbin. You said if you want to appeal to the broadest audience, clean is the best way to go. But does that put you into, does that restrict you, right? Because you don't have to be clean, right? You don't have podcast, again, one of the last mediums where, if I belt out the F word, it's fine.
Well, that's where it comes to what is your audience and how big of an audience do you want to appeal to? Because Jonathan's original question was, if I want to appeal to the broadest audience, because he was talking about the case of censorship, if he wants to get accessible to the broadest audience, should he remain explicit or should he keep it clean? And that's where I'm saying, clean does appeal to both the explicit and the clean. So it's a broader audience right there, because most people won't listen to a podcast just because it has profanity. But some audiences enjoy that more than other audiences. But that's where you can make something that's niched down and focused to a smaller audience, or you can make something that's broader and appeals to more. And that's where the guts comes in, and that we can do this. We can do whatever way that we want, really.
Yeah, and Gary mentioned, and I saw this a lot in the comments, because what's fun is I put out a description there, and people can comment on it, before that actual live stream. And Gary talked about, we are going niche. The type of content that we're producing is very different, because I asked in the description, are we really any different than old media, right? Or are we simply just falling into a mold that the media producers before us have set? And yeah, so the type, maybe the format, the content is different. That's for sure. I'm not arguing that. We're very unique in that we get to broadcast globally. We speak to a very specific, oftentimes to a very specific audience, which can be a very niche topic. I'm going to mute Paul for a while here while he gets set up. I did bring in someone else. And to mention, or to bring up, this is a very, I said in the description that this episode or this round is more in the spirit of what I originally intended Podcasters Roundtable to be, and that is just a conversation where we start off with a topic like this, we jump from there, and then we just talk about whatever. So that's what we're doing today. If we get off of this topic, it is fully intended to go ahead and go down another road. So we will see where it takes us. It's just a bunch of podcasters hanging out, having a conversation. Hopefully my camera hasn't gone away. It has gone away for me, but the Google's having some struggle today. Eileen thought maybe because we're like prime time hangout, man. There's a lot of hangouts. All these business podcasters are podcasting, broadcasting to their business audience. They're boring.
Oh, I think it's all the beekeepers around the world watching this episode.
Yes, we have rallied all the beekeepers of the world, and we have flooded the internet. Corey, now you do a sports show. Do you? I don't listen to it. No offense. I have listened to it. I don't listen to many podcasts. Believe it at this point. Are you boring? Is your show just like? Could I tune into the radio and hear pretty much the same Cub show?
No. And we started the IVMV podcast in 2009, early 2009, and our purpose was to not be sports talk radio, and so we were going to be as far as we could from that. And basically, what we decided was we were going to be the conversations that fans have, either sitting at a bar or barbecuing in the backyard about the Cubs, and have those conversations on mic. And so there was very little structure. My show prep involved, I came with a Post-it note with like 2 things written on it. And so that's basically what we were. And then as we went on, we found that we were kind of doing a disservice to the listeners, because there was no organization. There was nothing that they could really expect in an episode. It was just kind of free-flowing and everything. And so gradually over time, we've actually become a little bit more structured like sports radio. And what we've been able to do is like take the aspects that we have identified that work for sports talk radio and then ignore everything else. And so, which is basically all of the content. We've been able to ignore the content, but then, bring in some of that show structure and engagement with listeners. We don't take phone calls while we're recording, but we allow people to tweet messages at us and things like that. And so I think we've kind of, as I said, started off completely like we do not want to be anything like those idiots on the radio, and then kind of over the years thought, well, they know a few things that they're doing right, and so we've just kind of cherry picked a few things from them.
Yeah, I think the interactivity of a show is definitely something different, right? Live tweets. We can bring in the listeners more, and that is certainly different. I'm sure you get a call in on a radio, but it's not the same. This is much more of a diaper dive. Dipper? It's a diaper. I got diapers on the brain. So I got a 2.5-year-old, but it's a much deeper dive with the audience, I think. And, with this show here, okay, so with my first show, I mentioned it before, I did a show, it was a video podcast, it was about how to pick out fresh fruit, basically, and how to prepare that. And I started off like what you would see. It's funny because the idea was original to me, but then after doing it for a little while, I realized, you know what, this is a lot like a green grocer that you'd see on maybe your local news channel or just local channel where you've got the guy from the head of the produce department down the street in the grocery store, and he comes in, he gives us some boring facts about produce. And I said, you know what, I can do anything I want, so let's bring humor to this. So I started having fun, and I played with the show, and I introduced humor. I mean, that could be someone throwing seeds from a cherimoy or something at my head, which I had a friend's kid do. You know, we just had a blast because the whole point was, hey, it's just for some reason, I took old media structure and sort of started out to apply it to my own show, and then realized the world is my oyster, right? I can do anything I want. So I started to play with it. This show here we have different people on every time. That's not necessarily unique. You can have guests on the show. But there's no show intro, right? We just go. I mean, it's literally Podcasters Roundtable, round whatever. There's no outro. There's no bumpers. I've peeled away all of that stuff, okay, because it is just a conversation. And so with that, I think it doesn't follow that mold of, hey, you got to have a show intro. It's got to be branded and all that stuff, right? So I have fun with that. But the Podcasters Roundtable is a podcast about podcasting. If you listen to the other podcasts about podcasts, pretty much the same, right? Kind of open our show. We got a music bumper. Daniel, are we part of the problem? Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think there's a problem. But if you listen to podcasts about podcasting because you're trying to learn how to podcast, it's important. There are technical things you should get right. But everything else is just opinion and advice that you don't necessarily shouldn't follow. I'm saying don't listen to me, right? And sometimes don't listen to me. Don't listen to Daniel. Do your own thing. Don't get caught up in this is how it has to be because I want to have, you know, the most subscribers possible, right? We want the people who want to listen, not necessarily this huge number. What do you think, Daniel, about podcasting, putting people into sort of a structure? Are we building a structure that 5 years from now, hey, all these podcasts sort of sound the same?
Like with the Heil PR40 microphone that I'm now sick of because all of the podcasts are using it.
A lot of people, right? We're sort of tapering down podcasting from where it started was this huge, wide open world to, hey, we use these 3 or 4 microphones. Yeah. We all use the same webcam. You know what I'm saying? It's starting to sort of funnel to where shows are, I feel like, maybe losing uniqueness. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong, but I want people to think that way.
Well, there are 2 ways that you can really look at this. One is that there is a system or there is a mold that does work well, and so imitating that mold helps people. Now, success is never based on that mold. Just because someone's successful does something a particular way doesn't mean you'll be successful because you do the exact same thing. I've seen many people say, well, Leo Laporte does this and it's not hurting his podcast. Well, you don't really know that it's not hurting his podcast, even though he is already really big. But at the same time, yeah, we don't have to follow a mold, but there are certain things, kind of like best practices, that we've just found certain things to be a bit more efficient and help us communicate certain things or engage with our audience or ignite some enthusiasm or anything like that a little bit more than just trying to invent the wheel all over again just for the sake of having a different wheel.
Yeah, it says, Chris says, who would do a podcast about podcasting these days? Question mark and smiley face.
Someone just started one.
Yeah, a lot gets started and not everyone sticks around. So that's exciting. You know, I'm excited. I think I commented in the comment thread before leading up that I'm excited to see what the kids who didn't grow up with a TV, never owned a TV in their house, they certainly probably never turned on a radio. They watch YouTube. What are they going to bring, right? What are they going to bring to a podcast? So there's hope that we'll see these. I'm just looking for this thing that I don't know what it is because I haven't seen it yet, you know. And I originally in the beginning, there was a show called Epic Foo, which I really loved. It was a video podcast. I felt like that was very different. It really spoke to the medium of podcasting. They were always experimenting, trying new things. Loved the show. I think Seth in the chat room pointed out that WTF with Marin is just it's it's full of F words, right? I mean, and I feel like because there is no censors in the beginning, people they set themselves free for like a few episodes, and are like, and then they realize, they say the F word, F word, F word, or whatever. Then they realize, okay, I got that out of my system. Like, it's probably not actually the best thing to do for my content, and they calm down. I think I was watching Norm Macdonald. I was watching a Norm Macdonald. He does a video. He has Video Podcast Network or something, which is, his show is great because it's completely. He brings in obviously big celebrities into his little studios. A lot of celebrities building studios. Little tiny studios where they're becoming this all-in-one broadcast hub. And he has this basically a talk show online. It's like an hour. And the other day he had Russell Brand on, and that guy is it's probably an old episode that I saw, and that guy is completely uncensored. And even Larry King. But I was having so much fun because this was no episode like you'd ever see with these guys, because it was just a conversation about whatever. And it was unfettered by, like, being on the Tonight Show where you could and couldn't say things. And it was just, it was a great example of content online doing something different than what the old media does. However, it was structured the same, right? You had a table, you got a guest, we've got commercials, same structure. So the structure was a little boring, but the content was really good. And I don't know how much there is you can change with the structure. That's part of the thing. Having a show intro, having bumpers, having ads, how much more can you really change that? I don't know. So, Paul, I still see, looks like you're muted.
Hey, we
Go
got
ahead
a great
and unmute
comment here from Max. Max said, broadcast media is copycat. It's a natural human quality. Then eventually someone gets creative. It's considered new and fresh, and others follow.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always looking for the new and fresh. Like, just, and what sparked this thought, and a lot of thoughts like this happen all the time that we don't elaborate on, but was just the fact that the possibilities are endless. You can do anything you want. So I'm always hoping that podcasters are pushing themselves and not getting scared. Okay, so I mentioned the fact that there's a lot of business shows. There's a lot of people telling you how to be successful, to reach reach the most people, make money with your show. And I feel like that you start to really get put into this box of, like, I have to do this thing, or I'm going to lose a listener, or I'm not going to get as many listeners as I want, or the advertisers, you get an advertiser, boom, you got more structure put on your show, things you can and can't do. So, what role does that play? Corey, with your show, do you have you from where you started, have you felt any restrictions come onto your show? It's grown bigger as it's gone along, as it should. How has that changed the structure, or what you feel like you can do with your show?
As far as like our language and things like that.
Just your show. You said
just
you
in
opened it up
general?
with a Post-it note.
Well,
and once you start
yeah.
getting listeners, once you start realizing people are
Right.
listening, all right, people are noticing, are you then afraid to then have that same sort of loose? You're like, ooh, we've created this thing. It needs to stay this thing.
No, I think that we've still kept that fan feeling to it. But I think that what we identified is, and I think that we're in a stage where audio content delivery that the public is most comfortable with or familiar with is radio.
I got it. Okay. Paul's got speakers on.
Well,
Paul, your speakers are on or something. You need some headphones.
So I think the public is most comfortable with that format, and not necessarily, maybe they're open with, if they get a car that has Stitcher in it or something like that. They'll listen to a podcast, but I think if they have kind of that radio, I'm not saying it needs to be completely like radio, because I don't think that we should be, but I think that's what people are kind of familiar with. And if it's just rambling, like how we started, I think people are like, what the heck is going on here? This has no structure or whatever. And so what we've kind of done is been able to, content-wise, still have that fan perspective. The main way that we sound different than talk radio is that we're not idiots. Well, we may be idiots, but we don't enjoy being idiots, I guess. And, you have with talk radio, and especially sports talk radio, the host has their opinion, and they'll argue with anybody, and they don't listen to any amount of reason or anything like that. It's just very inflammatory, and that's not what we wanted to do. And we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into those topics and not keep it necessarily surface so that you appeal to everyone that's out there, but because we've been able to niche down and we're appealing to a certain type, we're not just appealing to Cubs fans, but we're appealing to a certain type of Cubs fan that and people that end up being similar to us, as far as demographics go and things like that. And so I think because of that, I'm in my mid-30s and I have kids, and so when I'm talking, I'm not going to drop an F-bomb because I understand that whoever's listening probably has their kid in the back seat. Now, we'll probably go right up to that. We'll toe the line and keep it just on this side of it. But, I mean, that is something that we keep in mind, too.
Cool. And, Paul, it's a little noisy over there. I'm going to work with your audio. But welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. I'm stoked to be here.
Well, and any updates for us? How you doing?
I'm doing okay for the most part. I'm in the middle of, actually, I'm at the end of my treatment schedule. For those who don't know, I'm a cancer patient, and I had a couple of weeks ago, they did an exam and found that I didn't have any evidence of cancer right now, which was really good news because when I asked my doctor straight up, I said, what do you think my chances are of being cancer-free? And he said, this is word for word, he said, Paul, I don't have a whole lot of hope for you. So the fact that he got in there and looked around and saw that there was no cancer, I was quite stoked about that. So I think that my mic's a bit hot, isn't it?
It's okay. I'm working your audio on this side, so I think we're good for now. So what do you think from what you heard so far?
Well, I think that a lot of this is pretty accurate. Talking about the format, I don't think that having a format is necessarily all that bad of an idea. I mean, every good story, as I'm a writer also, that you want to start any good story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And every podcast show should have that kind of a deal. There should be an introduction, there should be a discussion, and then there should be a conclusion. So if you don't have that kind of a format, it feels a bit wampus.
Yeah, I mean, are there any shoulds in podcasting? Because I just don't listen, right? Like if you don't have a structure and I enjoy structure, I just don't subscribe to your show. But we could do four guys in a room chatting about being four guys in a room, and no one pulls us off the air. I don't care. I'm just not going to listen to it.
Yeah, but I think it's a little bit of a misnomer thinking that podcasting is the only free expression out there, the only place where there are no gatekeepers, because there's always been other ways to do it that have not been necessarily mainstream, such as the public access TV. You got public access radio. There was also shortwave radio. All those things were completely free to be able to do anything you wanted to on them. You can still go on to public access TV and see guys that'll conduct the whole show and they're naked, and there is no gatekeeper stopping them from being the nude broadcaster.
True, so, but it has really changed where I don't live in that town, so Naked Dude show is not on my channel, but
no, you're
internet,
right.
It's global.
Access is definitely more available.
It's too bad, by the way.
Yeah, no, you don't want to see the Naked Guys show. It's not.
You're right. I don't. I only stretch my urge for creativity so far.
Yes, I heard someone say that the problem with seeing naked people is that usually the naked people you see are not the people you wanted to see, and the people you want to see are never available to be seen.
No one that goes to the nude beach should be at the nude beach.
Exactly.
So from what I heard.
Exactly. Yes. That's how your experience last time you were there, right? You thought, I shouldn't be here.
Yeah, I shouldn't be here. This is not good. Emilio in the chat, he says the amateur hour title doesn't offend him like it does some people. And I think that was completely mistaken out of context. People get offended so easily. And I understand it is amateur hour in that, as I said up front, most people come to this without experience. We're not professionals, right? So, and there's two ways that was taken and two ways it was said. And in the one hand, you got people in their basement broadcast. It's not, don't expect to pay $10 a month for it if it's not, if the quality sucks. I mean, there is a difference. That's mainly what I think he was saying when he said that. And, he says most people podcast, they do sound very amateur. Maybe they tried to break the mold and just ended up being very amateur. So, maybe some people put themselves out there trying to be creative and start a show that was different and break the mold, but people was either too creative or maybe it was not good. It lacked a structure. And people didn't follow along, so they either quit or just nobody's listening. So
well, and the other thing about that whole amateur hour thing, I totally agree with that. How many shows have you heard where the guys are putting in all these goofy sound effects? It's one thing to have like a couple of sound effects, like transitional things, but like every time that they blink or whatever, there's a spring going off in the background or whatever. It's like that's the type of thing where you say, "Good night. This is amateur hour. This person really should back off on their discovery of sound effects." It doesn't add to the show.
I think Daniel's scrambling for some sound effects. we had sound effects last round. We had podcasting pet peeves, and we had to have the buzzer, although we didn't get to use the buzzer much.
Oh yes, I was dinging. There's sound effects on here, so I was busting out the sound effects. Yeah.
Well, Google Hangouts not exactly it's funny because there's a difference between pro and cutting edge, right? A lot of our audio here is not that good. Certainly the cuts between cameras are not smooth. But where else can you do this, right? We've got New Zealand. We were supposed to have Australia. We got people from all around the world right now hanging out, right? This is a conversation that I might have over coffee at my coffee shop with one friend who's local. I have it with my friends who are spread out throughout the globe. So in that way, it's very different, right? I don't see, and it's funny because you see now old media is taking in our production methods, which oftentimes we use Skype to interview people. Now we see Skype coming into newscasts constantly. Tweets, right? They have live tweets going for all kinds of events now, right? So they certainly want you to be a fan on Facebook. So maybe we're creating the mold that old media is starting to follow. I think there actually has been a little bit of a shift there, so that's fun.
Yeah, I mean, do you think the censorship thing will still be prevalent when podcasting becomes more popular? I mean, will the FCC start censoring things? Or?
Yeah, I don't know what they can't do. I mean, certainly on a global platform, you can have a lot more issues. I mean, it's like HBO. It's not HBO. I mean, this isn't premium content necessarily. No, I don't know how you can really do that.
This is premium.
Yeah, this is premium. Other than what iTunes is doing, whereas if you are explicit, you don't label it that, you may get the boot from the store or something. But I'm not expecting regulations to come in and really ruin podcasting. I don't know if that. Anyone else? You think that the future is going to be more structured for podcasting?
I think Apple has a good standard in place, I think, and that is that they are saying you must carry the tag explicit if you're explicit, and that your title can't be explicit. I think that's probably as much as it's going to get. As long as you don't break those very simple rules, then you can stay on. And those, I think, are pretty good rules, because think about it, you don't really see movie titles with profanity or explicit stuff in the title. Sometimes the cover, depending on which section of the movie store, if that still exists, that you go to. But
it's a box in a grocery store now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the big red thing. So I don't think they'll increase it anymore.
Yeah, it's a little hard to do, but I don't put it past anyone. So be free while you can, people. Be free. Maybe they'll just charge some crazy rate to.
I mean, the other thing is, someone in New Zealand, we won't be having to put up with the laws from America anyway. So
that's what I'm saying. It's global. I mean, you really couldn't do that. But anyways, that's one of those things where we fall way off track. But Corey, what are you going to do? Yeah, you had a meetup. So here's one thing. I know you don't have a lot of shows that have meetups. Didn't you rally your listeners, right, to maybe your house? You had a big barbecue for your listeners or something. That was something pretty different.
Yeah, we had our 200th episode last summer, and just invited any listeners. I mean, we kind of appeal, because we don't live in Chicago. We're about 4 hours away. Our podcast kind of appeals to not just people in our area, but like Cubs fans that don't live in Chicago. And so, but around the Midwest mainly. And so we just invited people to come out to our place for a weekend. We have room for camping and stuff, and just made a whole weekend of it. And we had maybe 15 people or so come out, which was pretty fun. And we're going to do it again this year. But we've done other meetup. We did where I chartered a bus to go from where we are to Chicago Cubs games, and we were able to fill that bus with like 60 people a couple different times, and so we've been able to kind of bring the community together and things through those types of things.
Yeah, and what's the role of, for a new podcaster who's trying to learn how to podcast? You know, there's not like you don't go to school to be a podcaster, right? You know, it's not a program. Now, Daniel, you've got a class you can take once you have a podcast and make that podcast even better. Of course, all our shows about podcasting, you can go there and learn how to podcast. And then, of course, what most people do is they grab a mic and they start podcasting. They learn from their own mistakes, and they may just fashion it after podcasts that they like and they listen to. When you guys started podcasting, you know, how did you figure out how to podcast? How did you create the format for your show?
Well, I did the basics of like just doing a lot of research. You know, I've got out John Lee Dumas's ebook, and then I listened to show after show after show to figure out what it sounded like. And I'm kind of at the beginning stage, so, again, because I'm starting a new show that is going to be going live in about a week or two that will be in addition to Doubt the Doubts. But I think that the process has always been observation and then asking other podcasters how they do it. I think that's been my process. One, I did the research, I read the books, and then secondly, did a lot of conversations with other podcasters on how you do this thing, and it ended up being that it was not that crazy difficult to pull it off. You know, to get the right mics, to get the right sound equipment, to be able to record. I didn't find it to be all that crazy difficult.
Yeah, and then, you know, I mean, what is the right mic, right? We talk about it all the time, but you know, I know podcasters who grab an audio recorder, and you know, I think I'm trying to see. There are some running podcasts, for instance, that'll take an audio recorder and they'll go run on the trail, and you'll be outside, and that's cool, right? Or some guys will take an audio recorder and they'll stick it down on the table in the middle of a bar, right? And that could be cool. It's very different. But so there are all kinds of ways that you can produce. In fact, it's limitless. As long as you can record your audio, pretty much you can put it out there as a podcast. Daniel, how do you speak to a large audience, right, that's trying to learn while you're trying to teach podcasting? I find this a lot with my show, whereas we'll get criticism for something, and I'll often say, well, oftentimes I have to be a little vanilla in what I say because I'm trying to, you know, teach a broad spectrum of people who want to learn podcasting. So you should take the technical pieces, you know, you don't have to get the hosting I talk about, but here's why maybe you should get good hosting. And then when it comes to content production, maybe there are some rules that will help make that format better and flow better. But then really it should be your own. So, you know, what do you do to talk to a large audience that's trying to learn podcasting, yet try to make sure that everyone knows or do you care? Should people be unique, or should they all just sort of figure out how to do? Should they all take the John Lee Dumas School of Podcasting and sound like John Lee Dumas? By the way, don't do that. Like it's a lot of bad advice out there. I'm not saying that advice is bad. I'm just saying, you know, caution where you get your podcasting advice from. But you know, the beauty of podcasting is we try it, it doesn't work, we learn, we reshape it.
Yeah, it's hard because I don't like patterns, and I see podcasters falling into certain patterns where it's okay if you set your own pattern and you follow that. That's fine, but to an extent. But there are certain patterns where I hear other podcasters imitating other podcasters, and that's starting to get old because you start hearing the same people doing the same things and more people doing the exact same things. So I think about, as I'm teaching other podcasters, I keep thinking back to, are people going to imitate this particular way I do it? And their reason is going to be, well, Daniel does this, and so that's why I'm doing it. And I don't want people to cite me as their reason. They can cite what I say, I'm fine with that, but don't cite me to say, well, because he does it, I'm doing it too, and that's what's going to make it okay. That goes back to that. Well, Leo Laporte does this, and it's fine for him, or so and so did this, and they won an award for this, or multiple awards, and so it works great for them. If I just do that exact same thing, I'll have great success. No, it's bring yourself to this podcast, and not all of these other people that you're trying to be.
Yeah, I think, podcasting, like I said, I alluded to that podcasting started as this, I mean, it was just, like CB radio, like anything. You have this place that this audience now opens up. The world is open up to being able to speak into a mic and push it out there. And, the people who were here in the beginning, they loved that idea and they just did it. What's the role of advertising, money, trying to use podcasting for your business? All these, I feel like there's all these things that have been sort of heaped onto podcasting, which is good because that means podcasting is succeeding, it's growing. But, it's also creating probably a lot more structure than when podcasting started. And I hope it's not sort of putting a damper on creativity, right? So has anyone taken on anything on their show which has then changed, sort of the freedom that you have? Anyone have an advertiser?
I've had some advertisers before and work with advertisers.
And in working with the advertisers, how do you frame that in terms of your content, right? And, as far as what they want you to say or do or restrict?
Well, with an advertiser, it's usually they know what kind of content and what style you have as far as, are you explicit? Are you clean? Does your audience fit this potential advertiser? They know that kind of stuff. So the advertisers I've worked with are mostly pretty free about how you continue to host the podcast. Their main thing that they're passionate about is that you get their sponsorship right, that you give the right URL, the right calls to action, the right talking points, and that you properly represent their company during that advertising spot. And it seems like they've done their own filtering ahead of time to decide, can your show as a whole be something that they're comfortable connecting with and associating with for their brand?
Yeah, so I mean, advertisers, it's still early days for advertisers when it comes to podcasting. So I think you do have the advertisers that are in it are actively out there in the community, probably seeking out the content because they kind of have to. But at some point, there's going to be sort of this like central, point where people go and get advertising from. And then that may come with a lot of rules. I mean, look at YouTube. YouTube has changed a lot, right? I mean, you can put anything you want up on YouTube, but if you want to make money with YouTube, you better watch out for the music. You better watch out what videos you play in your Hangouts. You better watch out. There's a lot of things you have to watch out for. And any moment, they can shut off the pipe, right? So once you start dealing with third parties in your content and they restrict access, they could restrict access to your audience, it gets interesting, and I think it changes your show. Corey, I saw you shake your head there a little bit with the YouTube and.
Yeah, well, we've had advertisers in the past, and it's just been businesses that I think we've never been told we couldn't do something, and so I think it's partially finding advertisers or sponsors that are the right fit, and not just taking somebody because they're offering you a few dollars, but actually pick a business or a service or product or whatever that fits with your show. And by doing that, I think it'll be a pretty seamless joint effort, that you're going to do what they want. You are doing what they want, and the people that they want to reach are listening to you. So I think they can be a pretty natural thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited by podcasters making money. I am in favor of that, right? If all of us here could make our living by sitting in front of these very microphones, if this is all I had to do and then I just check out at the end of the day and a paycheck comes, that makes me pretty happy. And it would be awesome that if other people can do that. And I think people who are doing it now are building an incredible, not only a catalog of content and a portfolio, but they're building experience of how to do this stuff. So I'm excited for people to make money with their podcasts. But I'm also, cautious about what that might do to the content and what it does to you personally. Do you get scared to change when you've reached a little bit of success? Maybe you have an affiliate relationship, right? And you're like, ooh, I don't want to give my audience this other link over here because it's cheaper because it's going to offend this affiliate and I'll lose all that, I've come up with that situation. I just told the affiliate, you know what? If you don't have the cheapest price, someone else is gonna get the link. Paul is really changing up the format, and he's decided to podcast on his side. So his video is tilted 90 degrees. Way to think. You are still
He's
technically
breaking the mold.
Well, he's technically still in the box, but he may be thinking outside of it. I don't know what's going on there. But anyways, I did mention that about advertising and getting a little bit of success, and then having it's time. Now this train is on the track, and we can't go left or right. Sounded like someone might have had a comment about that, but
Yeah, I mean, do you think that advertising does change your content because you're not gonna, you're not gonna slag off a company that's sponsoring you, are you? That's my fear about it.
yeah, Gary says he's never had an advertiser make any request of any kind, but they know my show before they even started advertising. And I think that is the way it is right now, right? I don't think it's the way it's going to be in the future. I hope, because what that means is money's just going to start flowing into podcasting. I think we're seeing that every year. But hopefully you as the content creator, and that's kind of what I was getting at with Daniel, you're working the relationship. You're not just, there are networks you can join where they'll just push out a sponsor to you and you get a little bit of money from that. You have to follow certain rules, right? Then there's the actual advertiser relationship that's actually lucrative, where maybe you work one-on-one with the advertiser. And hopefully you're having conversation with that advertiser that the content is mine, the show direction is mine, I make all the decisions. You are coming to me because I have the audience you want. You like the content I've already done. So, encouraging there is to have that relationship. But I think it is going to change as more money comes into podcasting. People are going to be able to just sort of apply for ads, and they're going to get them. And then there are going to be a lot of more rules that they're not going to have that personal relationship with the advertiser.
So that's why Patreon model might be a good idea, because I know Corey. So,
I'm a huge fan of the Patreon because let your audience sponsor you, right? Of those, no one's restricted access by money. It's just people who want to support you. And I find that, a couple thousand people can almost do what I was talking about, can almost support a podcaster on an income. If you're able to garner enough audience and enough of that audience wants to support you and see you do that full time, it doesn't take a lot. It takes a small percentage of not even a huge amount of people to really do to support someone. And Patreon allows you, if you don't know what that is, it's just a crowdfunding campaign. It tends to be micropayments on a recurring basis as opposed to just one big payment for one big project. So I'm a big fan. I'm using it. Corey's using it. And it is like affiliate links. It just sort of sits there, and if people want to use it, they can, but it doesn't change your content at all. And in fact, you can offer a little bit more as a reward to people who are patrons, so to speak. So I'm a big fan of the crowd-funded model because it doesn't put that wedge between you and your audience of an advertiser, right?
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think that that's the appeal of Patreon. In my experience, we've only had it for a month and a half or something like that, and I think that like a lot of our listeners have been happy that now, we talk about them being part of our community and everything like that, but I think now they feel like they have ownership in it. Yeah. And so I think it's good on that front. But then also, kind of going back to having advertisers and sponsors and things like that, I think you owe it to your listeners you owe it to your listeners to have advertisers that they would be interested in. And if you, just as you said, Ray, sign up for whoever that's going to, pay you for your time on your podcast. It may be advertisers that your listeners don't want to listen to a 20-second little promo thing for them or something like that, or a spoken thing at the beginning of your show. If it's something that they're just not interested in at all, I think you're doing a disservice to your listeners by including that. So I love the idea of Patreon and crowdfunding, and I think it's a good service.
I have a question for you, Corey, on Patreon. Were you receiving donations or asking for donations or crowdfunding support in any way before Patreon?
No, and partially it's just because I didn't think that there was a really clean way of doing it. Okay. I didn't really want to have to do it constantly. And I mean, granted, like Patreon there's not a time frame on it, like maybe Kickstarter or something like that. But I didn't want to have to say on every episode or like ask people, oh, and you can send us money through PayPal. And I think that with Patreon, you're able to give them perks. You're able to give something back to them. And I think it's just the fact that it's a monthly thing. It's that income coming in that you don't have to, if somebody gives $10, you can, if you try to ask them 2 months later, they may not be interested in doing it, but they might be willing to say, yeah, I'll pledge $5 a month. And so I just think it's an easier way to do it. It's kind of less begging, I guess. It has a different feel to it. It has the feel of like, oh, you're supporting our podcast and continually supporting it, and we appreciate it. And like Ray said, you can give them bonus content or something like that. It just seems it has a different feel to it that I think matches the community aspect of podcasting more than just a PayPal.
Yeah, and I think go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Is it true that public access television in America has a similar model where people pay donations or pay money?
PBS, public television, like there is NPR, PBS, but they make money other ways too. I'm sure, but I mean, there's the question: what's the difference between a PayPal donation button on your website, and a Patreon? PayPal's still going to take a percentage of the payment, just like Patreon's going to. So I think Patreon gives a much better platform to produce that on, where I have this nice intro video there on the page when you go there and explains what Patreon is. It's got rewards and it's outlined, and you can try these different levels. So I think just like anything, if you pay, if you put a WordPress plugin on your site for members, you're responsible for mostly running all of that. Maybe the plugin does some of that. But there are all levels of how much do I want to have to deal with the back end of this supporting this platform, right? The platform that I've built to support the show. And Patreon does that, right? They handle payments, they handle all that stuff for you. And I like it. I like it for that reason.
Yeah, excuse me. I think the other thing is because a lot of our listeners are not from New Zealand, they can't, support our company. So it's actually quite a great way for them to support us. Because a lot of people do want to give back to podcasters, but they've got no way of doing it. Thoughts?
Well, there's also kind of I guess the seedy side of Patreon. The not completely pure intentions is that it's kind of the gym membership model where people say, oh yeah, I'll give $5 a month. That sounds good. And then, this is taking $5 a month and, it may be an amount where just like a gym membership, well, I'm paying for it and I'm not using it now, but, maybe I will in a couple months or when it gets cold outside or something like that. And so you kind of have that with Patreon. You're not having to keep asking or something like that, and it's just taking it from them. And it's, Ray, I pledged to your Patreon. It's just too much of a hassle for me to go in and cancel it. So you're going to keep getting.
Yeah, well, you're lucky. You're lucky. I don't think I'm not sure I've charged you anything. Actually, I don't. I'm not good at business, and I don't actually. I'm pretty stingy if I put something on there. And when you donated to mine, I think I gave the money right back to yours. So. For me, it's just kind of to see what the platform is about. It's really not about the money, but I do support. I fully support. I think it's a great way for podcasters to help someone have their show supported by their audience. And with PayPal, you can do the same thing. So I don't think it's you're not. I see what you're saying is like, hey, someone signed up for $5 a month and then they forget about it and they don't go back. PayPal, the same thing. You can do a recurring payment thing on PayPal. So that's just the nature of the game if someone decides to give recurring payments, right?
Well, so Patreon is breaking the mold in this space as well because they've seen what others are doing out there. There's the time-limited crowdfunding. There are the roll-your-own sort of method where it really takes a lot of skill and time and frustration and brain cells in order to put together your own donation platform. But on Patreon, you can just roll it out really easily and start benefiting from that. And so they have broken that mold. And we see this, many companies breaking the mold, like Stripe receiving payments, not charging for merchant accounts, and all of these different things like that. I think we'll continue to see that, not just in the podcasting space, but in every kind of media space out there. We'll be seeing these people breaking the mold and coming up with amazing innovations.
Yeah. And that's way to bring it around, Daniel, to breaking the mold is what we're talking about. Let's go out with that. Personally, I feel like I've broken the mold a little bit with my first show, which was a long time ago. Sort of got right into my own little my own mold there with the Podcaster Studio, and then this is a little different here. And then part of that is just the tech that drives this show is breaking the mold. Google breaking the mold often, but with your own show, do you feel like you've stepped out of the shadow of old media? Do you feel like you're doing something different? Do you plan to do anything different? Or are you happy being, the radio of internet? Corey, what do you think about all that? You take that anywhere you want.
Yeah, well, I think that we've been able to, like I said earlier, we've been able to pick the aspects of radio that's worked and then been able to identify the areas of sports talk radio that we think do not work and the areas that we hate. And so we've kind of been able to blend the two. And, I've had a lot of listeners, a ton, almost every listener that, contacts me or engages with me in any way almost, always says that they prefer listening to us way more than the Chicago sports talk radio people. And so I guess because of that, I felt like we've been able to break that mold, and we've, we're still giving the same, and I mean, IVMV, if you listen to our show, we don't sound like a radio show. I mean, like my friend Nick Suberling that does the Bengals podcast, if you listen to his sounds a lot more radio-like than ours does, mainly because he has some experience with that. He has a background in broadcasting. I obviously don't. And so, but I think that because listeners bring that up, then that makes me feel like we've succeeded in that, and we're giving something to people that we thought that they needed or that there was a demand for, and as it turns out, there is. Yeah,
that's awesome. And again, with this whole thing, like it's not a rub. If you sound like radio, all that matters is your show good, right? That, and actually, as I brought up with Paul, I don't care if your show's good at all, right? All I care about is if you're having a good time. Hopefully, you're not podcasting out of some like, I'm going to be rich and I'm not getting rich, or this is going to support my business and no one's podcast because you want to, right? And do whatever you want with it. So if you sound like radio and you're happy with it, that is good. Radio is not bad. It's not the enemy here. It's just the challenge is to realize that a lot of people have come from radio. A lot of these old or traditional media people are surprised. As I mentioned, I was watching that Norm Macdonald show, and someone they swore on it, and they're like, "Whoa, can I do that? Can I do that here? Is that okay?" And like. You see this reaction, and I think you heard about it. I think you've heard about it from a lot of these, again, the traditional people have come into podcasting and said, it took a little while to get used to the fact that no one is writing up the content for me. I can say what I want, take the show anywhere. If I want to talk a half hour about nothing, we can do that. We've got all the time in the world. We can go 10 hours if we want, right? We can be a 2-minute podcast if we want. So the freedom is there, and hopefully you take advantage of that, and whatever that ends up being, if your show sounds like the sports show that I can tune in on the radio, go for it. I mean, as long as you're enjoying it and your audience is enjoying it, and with the podcast, that audience can be more interactive, right? Even if it was the same show, even if a radio show went to a podcast, which a lot do, and I don't think they handle that very well because they just literally record and shove it into a feed. But if they make it podcast specific where it's more interactive, then even that's breaking the mold. They're doing something there on a podcast because they can't do it with traditional media, and then vice versa. Maybe I'm sure there's stuff that the radio brings that or TV brings that you can't get from podcasting. Although I don't know, I think we win, but it's a matter of what you do with it. So Daniel, breaking the mold. Have you broke the mold, or do you like the mold you're in?
I like to think that I've broken several molds and that I'm not trying to fit into a particular mold. And I do frequently look at how can I break my own mold Have I fallen into a rut just because and assumed something?
That's it. It's a challenge to myself, this topic, and right. So that's good. That's perfect. Exactly what I'm thinking. Challenging yourself, right? Have I broken? Am I breaking out of my own mold? Right? Am I doing something different all the time? Can I always be growing my show?
And in fact, I've had this planned for several weeks, but episode 170 of the Audacity to Podcast will start a series that will probably be at least 10 episodes where I will be challenging several of the presuppositions, the molds that we have ourselves in, and seeing which of these need to be broken.
Sweet. I like it. I mean, I've changed, here's show music is one thing, right? If you listen to the intro to the Podcaster Studio, it's this sort of hard rock song. People who listen to my show, in general, people are, you could have very easy, nice to listen to, pleasant, charming, vanilla music for your show because I'm trying to reach a broad audience. Maybe I'm trying to get some consulting. I'm trying not to put anyone off. Don't care. I don't care because that music is me, right? That's the music I like. Quite honestly, it's my show. I like a lot of people getting it for themselves. Then they get a little success or it starts to work. And while you should be in it for the audience, maybe they get one comment, right? And then they change their whole show because of one comment, right? From what they wanted to do. I've seen that happen too. I've seen a show turn to 360 because one comment. Could be a troll, it could be a real comment. But, hopefully you're still doing it for yourself as well. But yeah, I mean, if you like rock music, that's just a decision to make for yourself, right? It's a trade-off of, am I going to turn some people away that I think I might want to listen to my show, or am I just going to be myself and not worried? If they like it, they stay. If they don't, they go. So, Gary, you do a show about beekeeping, so there's probably not a mold to fit into.
Well, that's it. I mean, there's nothing out there in the real media about that. So I think that's how we're breaking the mold, is by actually producing something that no one else does. So.
Yeah, and again, podcasting gives us that opportunity. The content that we can produce is much different, right? You can't go to a network with a show about beekeeping in most cases, maybe Discovery Channel these days, and for the most case, you can't go to NBC, say, I want to talk to beekeepers, and they say, yeah, cool, you got a show. You can do that. So we are different that way. But then how you set up that show, how you go about it, right? Beekeeping, come on out and get your honey on Sunday the 29th. Are you just a radio show about beekeeping? Hopefully.
Yeah, no, that's what we do. We talk about news about beekeeping and interview beekeepers, and all about beekeeping, and also political stuff about pesticides and that sort of issues. So.
There you go. Yeah, introducing all kinds of angles. I like that. A beekeeping podcast, and then you're talking about politics, so it can take you anywhere. So that's good. Keep it up.
Yeah, you have to these days with the issues with pesticides and stuff. So
amazing what niche content can take you into a lot of different worlds. So
absolutely.
And Paul, you breaking the mold there, Doubt to Doubts?
I'm trying. We're trying to do something different. Well, initially I did fall into the mold of the Entrepreneur on Fire, John Lee Dumas show. I was almost imitating him not word for word, but let's say format for format. And it was like about 50 shows in, which I'm now like 180 something episodes now. That I think it was 50 shows in, I finally said, this is not me. And I broke the Dumas mold, which there's nothing wrong with his mold. It was just that it was the wrong one for me, and I started to do very, very much conversational approach, and also that daily show. I was doing the daily show, which is why I can within a year have over 180 episodes. I stopped doing the daily shows and started doing it 2 a week, so I could be able to do another show, which we're going to be launching here in a couple of days, called the Potter's Cast, which is specifically about artists in the ceramic world, and so I've started doing interviews for that, and so it is trying to niche down and be a bit different than I've done before. So yeah, I guess so. The short answer is yes, I'm trying.
That's it. That's the important part. That's what I want people to do. If I want you to come around away from this round, it's posing the question to yourself. That's it. Because I even had to do it to myself. When I first started, I had to break the mold, saying, what am I doing here? I got this opportunity to do anything I want, so let's have a little bit more fun with it, right? And then with the Podcaster Studio or even this show, are we doing something? Are we taking full advantage of the platform we have? And I think we are here because we're just talking about whatever we want. So that's a lot of fun. But
so Ray, question: how have you broken the mold? You've asked us also. How about yourself?
I brought it up a little bit. I mean, introducing humor to my first show. You got your rock music there on the Podcaster Studio. Although I will say that the Podcaster Studio is probably it's boring in terms of it being it's not very different. But I think the content's good, and it accomplishes what it sets out to do, and that again is important, right? Don't think you have to do something different, right? Is your show accomplishing what you want it to do? And the Podcast Studio is. And when I get bored of that, I go create another show, right? Podcasters Roundtable. We're breaking the mold here. There's no music. We're just talking. It's just sitting around shooting the hay. No time limits. We don't even have to stay on topic, people. But it works because I think in some circles, right, podcasters like to have these sort of loose-knit conversations with each other. So I will say yes and no, and it's an ongoing challenge that I think we're all working on. So lots of fun. We should get out of here. I will say, well, everyone gets, we sort of did an outro. What's your website? And we're out of here. Corey, website.
IVNV.com.
Awesome. Daniel.
TheAudacityToPodcast.com.
Very cool. Gary, where do you find your stuff?
KiwiMana.com. That's MANA.
Very cool. Paul.
DoubtTheDoubts.com.
Awesome. And podcastersroundtable.com. So check out the archives. We have a lot of conversations, some more focused than this. Maybe some aren't. Podcasting pet peeves. A lot of fun, right? But you can go also learn a lot about advertising on I think we talked about sponsorships, and it was pretty structured, but a lot of good information. So check out podcastersroundtable.com. Sign up. If you've listened to this far, you're probably subscribed to the email list, but if you're not, you should be. So podcastersroundtable.com. Get on that list, and we won't be stuck in Google's mold where we can only invite X amount of people, right? The list, I can go out to as many people as we have, and everyone gets to know when we're doing a round. So that's pretty good. All right, until the next round, we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.